better connected government experiences. I'm thrilled to be here. I am Dr. Craig Ogeron, a senior fellow at the Center for Digital Government and a professor of MIS at Millsaps College. I am very excited to serve as the moderator for today's event. And I just want to say a big thank you for taking time out of your day to join us. We're going to have a great 60-minute session today. So a little bit of housekeeping before we kind of dive into our content. We've designed this webcast to be interactive, and we very much want you to participate in a Q&A with us. And you can do that by submitting your questions using the Q&A widget. Send in your questions as they come up throughout the presentation and throughout us covering a lot of great material, and we'll address them, as many of them as we possibly can. You can also increase or decrease the size of your media player and the slide windows. We're going to email a recording of this presentation to you within about 48 hours. So please use the recording for your reference, or feel free to pass along to colleagues using the share widget in the console menu. Also, please check out the really great Logitech resources in our resource widget. And as we wrap up the webcast today, we'll encourage you to complete a brief survey about the presentation. We really want to hear what you think. If you're unable to stay with us the entire time, but would like to complete the survey, just click on the survey widget at the bottom of the screen to launch the survey. Otherwise, it will automatically pop up when we wrap up today. Okay, with housekeeping out of the way, I want to make a couple of introductions. Joining me today to discuss this really timely topic will be Scott Wharton, the Vice President and General Manager of Logitech Video Collaboration, and Shogman Spaden, a Senior Fellow at the Center for Digital Government. Gentlemen, thank you so much for being here today. Scott, why don't you get us started by telling us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Like you said, I'm the General Manager of Logitech's global business for video collaboration, but also all of our B2B products that go into government and enterprise. And I mean, part of what I'm working on, I think, is helping us figure out how to solve these problems of we have people who are now not only in offices, but they're working all over the place, home, on the road, in the office. And how do we solve the problems of bringing us all together in a way that makes us all productive and efficient, knowing that we may be distributed, and it provides a whole bunch of opportunities, but also I'd say it broke a bunch of things, and then it makes collaboration a lot harder than it was in the past. So hopefully we're going to talk about how do we fix these broken things? What can we do to make it better?
Absolutely. Sean, a little bit about yourself.
Absolutely. Scott and Craig, it's great to be with you. Great to be with the audience here today. As Craig indicated, I'm Sean McSpaden. I serve as a Senior Fellow for the Center for Digital Government, but continue to work in Oregon State government. This is my 25th year in Oregon State government, the first 15 years in the executive branch. The last 5.5 of those years of my tenure, I served as Oregon's Deputy State Chief Information Officer. And then about 10 years ago, transitioned over to the Oregon Legislative Branch, working in the Oregon Legislative Fiscal Office. I've got pretty broad information technology, cybersecurity, GIS, program and project oversight responsibilities, and also serve as the committee administrator for Oregon's Joint Committee on Information Management and Technology. So great to be with you both today. I really look forward to our conversation.
Well, thank you both for those intros. So to kind of set the stage a little bit for our conversation, you know, as we were preparing to do this, we noted that technology advancements and the evolution of government workforces have really accelerated and changed in recent years. We know a lot of that was the COVID sort of situation we grappled with. Digital technologies, Scott, you mentioned this, flexible work arrangements and cloud computing are really opening the doors for state and local government leaders to just reimagine both sort of the workforce elements that are at play, but also the elements related to delivering essential services to citizens, to keep communities healthy, safe, of course, and connected, which is sort of the world we live in. So in our time together, we're going to jump in to these themes, as we kind of call them, these trends, look at some best practices and ideas that are really helping to empower government workforces to improve services, optimize communication, and of course, drive efficiency and doing it at the best possible price point. Okay, so with that, let's jump in and just see what our audience is thinking with a poll question. So our first poll question for today: which aspect of the evolving government workforce do you find most challenging? There are many challenges. What do you find most challenging? The management of flexible work and remote teams, which again, as Scott mentioned, is something we're going to dive into. Inclusive, equal engagement for these participants on your team that may be remote. Setting time for meetings and workspace allocation. Desk booking and resource management. Workspace utilization, and real estate cost. So let's let everybody take a little bit of time to kind of take a look at these questions and really think about what these challenges may be. Okay, let's see what our results are showing us. What do those numbers look like on our results side? Wow, okay, so a little bit top heavy in some of them. So real quick, but before we jump in, Sean and Scott, what does this say to you when you sort of see this? Is this something that you would have expected or not expect? Scott, what do you think?
Well, I think first of all, the market has moved so fast that I think there's a lot of confusion overall. So I'm not surprised you see a little bit of a spread. I think the equitable meetings, I'm not surprised. I think that's been for Logitech one of our top priorities. And I think I neglected to say at the beginning that some people say, are you competing with Zoom or something? But we're not. We're the biggest equipment maker that works with Zoom, Microsoft, Google. And I would say that the requirements for having meetings are really changed. And that used to be simple. You just put a video conferencing stuff in a room. Everybody went to the office and it worked. You connected the offices and it worked fine. But now, a very common scenario is you have some people are at home and they're connecting into somebody in a big room and you can't really see or hear them very well. So I think we keep hearing over and over again that how do you solve this problem and make sure that the people who are remote are not second-class citizens or participants? So the 50% thing does not surprise me at all.
Sean, what do you think? These two big buckets, we have 80% in two of them. Is this, to Scott's point, is this what you were thinking or not, or what?
Yeah, I mean, I think it aligns with what I expected in terms of the audience response. I mean, let's face it, over the last 2 to 3 years, prior to the declaration that the pandemic emergency was over, virtually the entire world and certainly state and local governments went 100% remote. And now, over the last year or so, as the country and each of our states and our counties and cities have gotten a better handle on how to create a safe environment, we've had a real mix of workplace policies. I know within Oregon state government, we have pockets of employees who have been called back 100% to the office. We have others that have, in the executive branch in particular, been given the discretion, agency by agency or work unit by work unit, to have different telework and remote work policies and approaches. And that, for technology solutions, can create just some, real challenges, some that have never been experienced before. And so Scott's absolutely right. One of the keys is ensuring that those employees who are not physically located on premise still can equitably participate. They can interact with their coworkers and their managers, and that they're not disadvantaged in any way in terms of their ability to kind of understand and participate in the conversation, much less, be an active role player on the team.
Sure. So we got started with kind of getting a feel for the challenges, right, that our audience is dealing with. So as we move into our discussion, I think what I want to try to do is center this on 3 themes that we'll kind of dig into here over the next hour, right? So the first, of course, is equipping the workforce, right? How do we do that? You both spoke, eloquently about the challenges, the disparity. How do you ensure inclusion? So we'll deal with that. I think secondly, and it's always top of mind, right? When I was a CIO in government, right? How do you enhance the constituent experience? How do you provide great service? And then I think thirdly was a point you both touched on. These things are going to require transformations, right? So we're going to kind of jump into how to drive these digital transformations, which can be tough in and of itself, right? There are cultural issues. There can be all sorts of issues. So let's get going. So our first theme, equipping the modern workforce, right? So we're talking tools, we're talking strategies for not only cross-agency collaboration, but potentially team building and sharing. So Scott and Sean, let's jump in here. So how can government IT leaders enable really robust cross-agency collaboration? What's top of mind for you?
Well, I'd say a couple of big problems that we're working on. One of them, as I alluded to, is how do you support people who are in different places on all sides? And I think one of the fundamental technology problems is that it used to be good enough to have one camera system in the front of the room. But now that you could have 12 or 20 people in the room, it's just harder to see or hear people. So one of the analogies we're using is, I would say, less Silicon Valley and a little bit more Hollywood or big sports. If you think about it, if you're watching a big sports movie like the NBA game, there's not one camera following the action. There are multiple cameras, and they're moving around and giving you the best shot. So part of what we're trying to do is emulate that with a multi-camera system that's kind of driven by a smart director. Now, we can't afford Steven Spielberg because he's busy, so we use AI to kind of move the camera around. Yeah. And in some ways, I think we've rolled out a system that could be almost better than sitting in the room, because you have that, just like it could be better watching the sporting event at home in some ways. So I'd say that's one of the main things that we're working on. The idea is that you have to have cameras with different angle shots, but you also need smart software to figure out what to show. Like, you don't want to just show everybody necessarily like they're at home. You have the ability to do it better. Again, like the sporting analogy, you don't see 10 basketball heads bouncing around. You show where the action's at. I think that's number one. I think the second thing is, I think there's this tension between, and you see it in the survey results, mandates and people going, well, I don't know if I want to go back. And I've heard this expression that I love. It's this idea of earn the commute. So don't mandate for someone to come back. You have to earn people's right to come in. And if you think about an example of that, many of us who are listening might go to a restaurant in a downtown. There's no mandate to go back to restaurants. We just do it because it's fun. We decide to go in. I think we need to take that same approach for going into the office. We need to make it valuable. Part of what we're working on there is to try to make sure that it's not only that you have the right systems and booking, but that you can know that your colleagues are going to be there. Almost in a way, I can describe more later, like a social network for the office. Like, if you go to the office 3 times in a row and none of the people you're working with are there and you're just sitting on a video call, guess what? You're going to stay at home. Yeah. So I would love to have a discussion more with you in the audience about how do you solve that in particular? Because it's a big problem.
I've had that experience, and you're spot on, right? You kind of show up to a shared workplace, and it's you and the Keurig machine, and that's about it.
That's right.
Sean, cross-agency collaboration, what's top of mind for you here? I know you have a lot of experience in it.
Well, I'm going to touch a little bit on the people and process side. Scott hit the technology piece and earning, people's commute, so to speak. But, suffice it to say that enabling effective cross-agency collaboration on initiatives that expand beyond the boundaries of a single agency can be really challenging as an example, a state government. In particular, those challenges can be really difficult to overcome in a decentralized environment where you really don't have that enterprise ethos or that program area solution experience, where, an environment where the silos rule, so to speak. So, let's face it, the leaders and staff within the individual agencies in a state government that has that kind of organizational structure, they're rightfully concerned with, the key priorities, goals, and objectives of that singular agency. That's what they're held accountable for. And so, as an enterprise CIO or technology leader responsible for implementing, program-wide solutions, holding the view that the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few or the standalone agency, you need to understand that it just isn't in the agency, single agency leaders' job description to put their priorities aside and focus on what you hold most important. Even the governor, what the governor might hold important. So you got to understand that. And so, you really do have to rely on, coalitions of the willing, on collaboration. It really does require trusted leadership, strategic relationships, and honest and authentic communication to create and enable effective and lasting cross-agency collaboration. And, if you want it to sustain beyond administrations, you're really going to have to get formal about it. You're going to have to establish some formal governance and communication structures that really ensure that there's equitable representation, that there's transparency, that people understand what's in and out of scope in terms of those enterprise initiatives, and that there really is this consistent and clear communication about decisions, the progress that's being made or not, changes and issues, and that people can effectively raise issues and get them resolved. It requires the kind of leadership and vision for the future that's large enough for those individual stakeholders to dare to believe, so to speak, that an enterprise or program-wide initiative really can be successful, because we've all been involved in a whole bunch of initiatives that have started off strong but fizzled out because of individuals that leave or because of changing priorities. And so that's kind of what I would focus on. For our audience that's thinking about their leadership role as a program-wide or enterprise-wide, responsible party for these kinds of initiatives.
Sure. Scott and Sean, it can be so challenging to do what we're talking about, right? To do this collaboration across these entities. But you know what? Building effective teams can be just as challenging, right? Even if it's folks that you've known for a while. But we talked about this disparity, right? Of not just geographic or am I in the office and am I not? So tell me what you think about strategies for building effective teams in sort of this potentially uneven digital environment. Scott, what do you think?
Well, one, I think we should focus on the opportunity that if you're running a government group or an agency, the limitations now of having everyone in the same office, you have a little bit more flexibility to hire people that are not only in that area or commuting area, number one. Number two is, I think we've talked about, from a values point of view, having flexibility where different people have different needs versus only being in an office. And that could be family needs or physical limitations where we could open it up to people who can contribute more. I think those are all great opportunities. Okay, great. But then how do you have to manage that? And I think we kind of alluded to it earlier. I think one is just adding audio and video that it works well. And partly it's, I talked about the conference room, but partly it's upgrading people's home experience too. I think what we found is that many people, took whatever they could grab out of their office in March of 2020, and they're still having their hacked up environments. You know who you are out there. So I think there's an opportunity to upgrade people in a way that are using these things, almost every day, as opposed to something that was a hack from 3 years ago. And then, people talk about AI in the context of ChatGPT, but I think AI is really revolutionizing collaboration in that it allows you to have all this multi-camera smart control and also maybe analysis of how do you run meetings better. So there's a whole bunch of AI that me and my team are working on to make sure that team experience is better and kind of leapfrogs from where we were, where it's just a single camera, static image, et cetera.
I love the leapfrog analogy, right? Because that sort of suggests, sort of this concept you might have to leap a little bit to find your way, right? This may not be, it really may not be incremental, right? Which we talk about a lot. It may be more of that. I got a question just the other day from a colleague here at the college where I teach about, coming into the office. And Scott, you said something, and I kind of said, well, my home setup is just so much better, right? I wasn't trying to disparage the team on campus, but it was more of a, I've kind of gotten used to the cameras and the lighting and sort of the setup, as you said, Scott, the tools and tech that I have that make me feel very, very connected, but very productive as well. So I
Yeah.
think those were spot on. Go ahead. Yeah.
I
Other
was going to say,
comments?
I think we need to rethink why people go in. I think there's this
Yeah.
idea of, I don't even, in some ways, I don't like this return to the office because it implies that what we did in 2019 is what we should be doing.
Yes.
And in many ways, if you think about it, if you're sitting down and you're doing some focused work, I think for most people here listening or our constituents, it's better just to be at home in a quiet area. So then it begs the question, like, why do I want to force everyone just to go back to sit there either on video meetings or doing what they could do at home? And I think it forced us to rethink, all right, why do people actually get together? And then you focus on, all right, it's not doing those things. It's collaborating, it's ideating, it's bumping into people. It's really socialization. So I think it's an opportunity to say, why are we doing it? Not just we need to go back. And then it opens up opportunities to do things better and more flexibly.
Agreed totally. So, robust cross-agency collaboration, right? Phenomenally close and creative teams are the bedrock of enhancing and delivering wonderful constituent experiences, right? Which is really what our jobs are. I mean, that's what we do. So what we're talking about, is potentially accelerating service delivery, maybe personalizing kind of communication and experiences that citizens have, and enhancing or increasing engagement. So pivoting to sort of our, we touched on workforce, pivoting to our second theme for our talk today, the constituent experience. So give me the big picture and then we'll kind of dive in. How can state and local governments, Sean, we'll start with you, accelerate service delivery, right? I mean, how can we take advantage of these tools and techs to make service delivery stellar?
Well, I appreciate that lead in, Craig, and I'm really going to provide more of a setup for Scott here and talk a bit about some of the challenges that lead to the important strategies and tools and technologies that I know he and his team have been working with state government folks on. But the business and resident customers of each state, they rely on government at all levels to provide essential services that help them establish, run, and grow their businesses, that help keep them and their families healthy and safe, that provide essential information that allows them to work in their chosen profession or voluntarily comply with government regulations or simply to live fulfilling lives, parks and recreation, fish and wildlife, what have you. But regardless of the information that they try to access, those customers, they have to rely on government entities at all levels and government information technology systems that are sometimes, 20, 30, 40 years old. They're often seeking these vital services and information in their greatest times of need. You think about unemployment, you think about health benefits, food benefits, trying to interact effectively with the courts or with public safety. At the same time, there's really just this growing gap, this backlog of IT modernization initiatives that that really highlight the current customer experience and the failures of our legacy processes and information systems to meet those needs, and what the future or current and or future expectations are for our customers in terms of ease of use, self-service, or expanded payment options, just for some examples. And within Oregon state government, at the state and local government level, we've got 100 state agencies, we've got 8 regional governments, 36 counties, 241 cities, and over 1,000 special districts, and we all do things differently, right? The public really doesn't know what level of government necessarily is responsible for the information or services that they're trying to access. And so these entities, they set modernization and digital transformation goals and objectives independently of one another. So that's a real problem when you think about employees or citizen and business customers having a common experience with government. And And so, just trying to expect that those folks are gonna know who to contact in the manner that we want, it's just irrational, and it creates and highlights those administrative burdens, and we all incur a cost, to reputation, to the trust that our residents place in government, and we really can do better if we collaborate to better serve our common customers. So Scott, there you go. I'm kind of setting that up for you to talk about some of the tools and techniques, the technologies that you and your teams are providing state and local governments to try to solve some of these issues.
No, that's great. I appreciate it. I'm thinking of three specific scenarios where you can both radically improve the ability to serve your constituents, but also potentially save money in this environment where everybody's looking to save costs. So let me start with town halls. All governments at all levels need to do them. I had an experience with my own local city government where pre-pandemic, all meetings for town halls were in person, which was a problem because people were working, can't necessarily make it, have family obligations, et cetera. And then they went to the pandemic where they were all virtual, and that was amazing, and that had opened it up to a whole bunch of people who couldn't go. More recently, I went to a meeting where they had it hybrid, where they had people in person, people remote. And what they did is they took a product that we make, and it was designed to work for a room with 6 people, and they had 60 people in the room. Mm-hmm. And it was a complete disaster. No one could hear them or see them. So in theory, it would have been great if you have this mix of people, but the tools were just not designed for that. So I think what we would all like to do is have a town hall be open for people who want to show back up in person, but also make it democratic. Open up for people who are not able to make it. And I think in order to do that, you need tools that really scale up for these bigger locations. There are opportunities to do that, but that was an example where it was a big miss. I think we could radically improve the accessibility and the performance of our town halls. That's number one.
Yeah.
Second thing is I think about appointments that governments have. When I used to go for the global entry service for traveling, I'd have to make an appointment 5 months in advance, leave work, show up at the airport, wait in line. It was a real burden to do it. And not only that, but navigating the website, how to do that. I think there are a lot of people, especially maybe some older people, who can't navigate all these hard technology options. Now they have it where you could do a video call online. So when I renewed my global entry, I did a video call at my desk. Took 10 minutes. It was so much better for me, so much better and cheaper, I think, for the government. So I think there are all these examples to take a page out of telemedicine where these things we said were impossible to do now are very possible. So think about moving appointments to be more flexible over video. Mm-hmm. I think the third thing is there are a whole bunch of sessions that governments have, whether they're court sessions or hearings, where you really try to move everybody to one single location. And the idea of moving them to a hybrid where they're virtual, where you can save money and the security of moving people who have gone from a courthouse or prison, huge ability to both improve the experience and have savings. So I think those are just 3 specific areas where we could radically not only improve the performance and the way we serve our constituents, but potentially use technology to save a lot of money without compromising the integrity of the services. I'm sure there are more, but those are 3 examples that come to mind that we've been working on.
Sure. You bet.
Yeah, go ahead, Sean, please. Yeah.
Craig, if I just jump in on that last point.
Yeah, of course.
In my experience with the Oregon legislature, you may not know it. You probably know that Oregon is one of the smaller states by population. I think it's 29th, something like that, but it's the 9th by geography. We have 98,000 square miles. We have small people who live in small communities that are 10 hours. They're right on the eastern border of Oregon with Idaho. It takes about 10 hours to get to Salem, the capital. And so, we've got people who want to interact with government, want to participate in the public process, and heretofore they've been required to drive 10 hours to sit in a hearing room, right? And so, the pandemic really opened our eyes to the fact that remote hearings were absolutely possible. The technology existed and we could do it effectively. As we've moved back into the Capitol, we've primarily held in-person meetings in our hearing rooms, but we have that hybrid capability where both people who are presenters or are being asked to provide invited testimony, and or those
Hmm.
folks who want to provide public testimony can simply get the link, register for public testimony, and participate actively as they'd like. So it's really important, not just for cost savings. Certainly, it's cost savings to the constituent who doesn't have to drive 10
Yeah.
hours. It's also important for maintaining, sustaining, and increasing that public participation in the legislative process.
Agreed. You've both touched really nicely on really engagement, right? And then which is so critical, but also potentially satisfaction, right? That these services or technologies can do that. Let me touch on real quickly because the personalization aspect from a communication experience. And I know from my own experience, it's something we've talked about many different years. But a couple of quick comments. Scott, I'll pivot back to you on the personalization experience with respect to constituents.
Sure. And the question is, how do you personalize it?
Yeah, what would you consider to be a best practice for personalizing a communication experience with a citizen, right? I mean, is that still something that's over the horizon, or kind of are you seeing that with what you do?
Well, I think we talked about it in a little bit of a ways in that there's personalization and how people can access services and how they can achieve it. Not everyone can go to Salem. I think that's a great example.
Yeah.
And some people may prefer to watch it from home. Some people don't want to take off from work. So I think there's a huge productivity loss in the old model that we have, where everything has physical proximity to the services. So being open it up, I think, certainly gives a lot of personalization. Let people get served the way they want to do it. I think the other thing is you have the opportunity, I think, for some of these hearings, it can be asynchronous. So maybe you go to that thing live, but maybe for that hearing in Salem, you could watch it offline, but have it recorded.
Yes.
And you watch it when you want to watch it, or you can pause it and watch in chunks, kind of apply Netflix mentality to the government services, which is probably not something that we largely do today. And then I think there's probably just different form factors. Like sometimes you do it at your desk, or think about how you do it when people are on the go, different mobile devices. So it's probably a different way of thinking about how do you personalize things based on the way they want to be served.
Sure. So we've talked about the workforce end. We've talked about the constituent end. Truth be told, right? I hope we agree. These things can be challenging, right? COVID certainly gave us the impetus, the absolute necessity to push us forward. It kind of served as an accelerant. But driving digital transformation is not for the faint of heart, right? When it comes to dealing with people and dealing with organizations. So, we may be talking about fully optimizing cloud communication experiences and sort of doing that, as we talked about, to increase productivity and streamlining workflows, right? How agencies cross-collaborate, or how we build really robust great teams. So let me jump into sort of this transformation element. So how can cloud communication experiences be optimized for government use? Sean, Scott, either one, jump in on that one. What do you think about that?
Sean?
I'll kind of start just from the perspective of implementing cloud solutions, and then Scott can put a finer point on it. Of course, in government at all levels, we're all looking toward the cloud. We're evaluating our legacy system portfolio of systems. We're trying to evaluate, which systems need to be replaced and why. We're trying to be thoughtful about not just modernizing, those legacy systems just because they're old or difficult to secure, but we're also trying to focus on the portfolio of systems that, if we modernize them, they would provide better service. They would enable our employees to be more efficient and effective. That they would have a bigger bang for the buck in terms of, increased trust in government, increased interaction with our customers, those kinds of things. And so, cloud solutions generally speaking, can be implemented far more quickly than our traditional internal develop system, or even our turnkey purchase and deploy type of system that might require some customizations. Also, of course, the use of cloud solutions, it requires a shift in thinking and approach. In the old days, we'd send out an RFP, we would ask for technology solutions to essentially emulate or automate our legacy processes, right? We didn't have to change, we wanted the systems to change. So now with these cloud solution providers, Logitech and others that are out there, they're serving jurisdictions all across the country. They're implementing tools in ways that we're not even aware of. And so we have a great opportunity to take our blinders off, really, and to either eliminate processes that don't provide value, re-engineer or simplify them, and certainly, kind of take a deep breath and allow ourselves to be forced to modify an organ-specific approach to something that is more standardized across the country, right? That we're emulating experiences that business and resident customers across the country might have, as they move from state to state, so to speak. And then, certainly cloud solutions can be a real enabler of multi-agency, program area, or even enterprise-wide normalization and standardization. Again, creating a more common employee or customer experience along the way. As I mentioned, Oregon's very decentralized. We've got 100 plus, just state government alone, 100 plus generally autonomous organizations. And there's a lot of cooks in the kitchen, right? People that are implementing, similar technologies in vastly different ways. And so as we all move to a cloud solution, it again gives us that opportunity to create a more common experience for everyone.
Yeah,
sure. Scott,
yeah, it's interesting. So I've been having some discussions internally that I think emulate probably in the enterprise space that probably happens also for government, and that you have internal IT teams who always think they can do it better than what's out there. So they customize things, and then there are two big problems. One is you hit a strategic dead end. So, all right, you wrote the code, but how do you continue to update it? Now you own this thing in perpetuity, right? Whereas when you go to an outsourced cloud model, oftentimes you get all the updates for free. You get that innovation. And the second point is you think you've saved money, but now you own this thing and you have to write the code forever. So it's going to be way more expensive probably than if you thought about outsourcing it. So I think these are problems in all big organizations where there's like, my needs are specific and custom. No, they're not. Usually most people's needs to do whatever workflow is pretty common. So I think that's just a fallacy that I think it would be great if governments would think the same as private sector companies. Think more about how do you leverage stuff that's outside because it's easier, more flexible, and ultimately lower costs. And I'd say the other thing is there's a value of simplicity. Like in order to make these things work, I think it was a question from John Zamara, how do you make this accessible to people? And I'm going through the experience right now with my mom, for example, who a lot of government services now, they won't let her call or show up. They're forcing her to go to her phone, and it's really difficult for her. And I think some of these systems are just, very difficult to navigate. So I think part of the approach should not only be about saving money, but absolute simplicity. And I think a lot of these new cloud services are much simpler and easier to access. I think that just because you have them doesn't mean that everybody in a society is capable of using them. And I think we have to be careful to not leave a whole bunch of people out who are not as literate as and John, I think the point you're bringing up is right. It's a problem that we need to address.
Yeah, I thank you for saying that, Scott. I saw John's question as well. And you mentioned, your mom. The word I kind of think about is sort of this potential disenfranchisement, right? That sometimes these technical solutions can do that. And I thought you spoke really eloquently about the simplicity of it. The other thing I guess I think about is, really a CIO, sort of that mentality is just the sheer pace of innovation, right? I mean, it's really difficult to, in my head, like in my old life, my stomach actually tightens up when I think about, like, am I running a data center or multiple data centers, which a lot of us did for years, and I have to build these things, right? So the ability to ingest, Scott, you mentioned it some time back, right? So whether it's AI or something, to ingest these tools to immediately get to innovative solutions is really one of the things I spend a lot of time thinking about, right? And cloud certainly does that, and it does it at scale, right? To make the changes that you need to make, right? So in some ways, I think tools and toolboxes that have multiple pieces and parts in them can help you on the digital transformation front, right? Because it can get you to that place quicker. Albeit, the organizational piece can still be tough, right? Changing organizations and grappling with that. So let's talk a little bit about, it came up a few times, but this efficiency concept and cost reduction, right? We know we don't want to just sort of give lip service to these things. Tell me real quickly, each of you, about, so in this sort of cloud digital transformation context, where does your head go when we talk about efficiency or the potential to, if not reduce cost, deliver maybe a better service at the same price? What's the first thing in your head when you hear that?
Go ahead, Sean.
Sure, and again, I'll kind of hit on the process piece. In my mind, certainly there's that trifecta: the people, the process, and the technology that we all deal with anytime we're thinking about transformation or modernization or trying to identify ways for efficiency and cost reduction. And so, just as we really don't uniformly have an accurate and complete, timely inventory of our hardware and software, we certainly don't have good insight or good documentation on our business processes and workflows. And those are really what drive or are involved in that interaction with between our employees and the customers they serve. And so we kind of have to roll up our sleeves and do the foundational blocking and tackling, the inventorying, the mapping, the assessing of our existing processes and workflows. We've got to rank those processes for either elimination, reengineering, simplification, whatever you might call it, and then finally automation. And as I mentioned earlier, we need to decide what our targets are. Are we focusing on the efficiency piece, on the cost reduction piece, or on the improved digital experience piece? Because it'll really matter where we spend our limited dollars. We've got to be clear on those decisions and make sure that our leadership is aligned with that. Of course, once we take those actions, those purposeful actions on our purposes and workflows, we gotta test them out. We've got to have a feedback loop and analyze those outcomes, and then adjust and refine. So kind of that typical 5 or 6 steps you got to go through to be able to catch the ball, hit the ball, and
Sure.
run the bases properly, so to speak.
Yeah. So Scott, what do you think? Efficiency and costs.
So I read this book a while ago that made a big impact on me. It was called Reinvent Government. I think it was associated with Al Gore at the time, but I think it was a bunch of people who were in government. And what I loved about it was the idea is that it asked the question, what is government good at? And what is it not as good at? And the main thing it said is government is really good at setting values, steering the direction, priorities. You cannot outsource values or priorities to the private sector. We need to collectively do that. We need governments for that. But we don't necessarily need government to do everything. And they gave the analogy of if you're in a boat, government is the one that should steer, but it doesn't need to row necessarily. So I think oftentimes our governments, we try to do too much. Where we really need governments is to represent our values collectively and steer in the right direction, and then look for other resources to be able to do the work. And I think if you think about it from a technology point of view, the idea is use some more of these outsourced services, especially in the cloud, where they are innovating so much faster than I think it's possible usually to do in the public sector. I can say that particularly living in Silicon Valley, I'm just amazed by the speed and the pivot around AI. You can't swing a dead cat without having a conversation around here about AI. So how do people in the public sector harness that? And I think the idea is don't necessarily try to do it, harness that innovation coming out largely of the private sector, but make sure we don't outsource the values of how we want to do it, how we want to put guardrails around it. So I think probably we do too much. We should be looking at more specifically at things like cloud services and off-the-shelf technology to be able to leverage it and go faster and cheaper and then take advantage of their innovation curve rather than thinking that we could do that in-house. That's probably the biggest shift I would recommend.
Yeah, I will say you paint a picture. I think I've been hit by a couple of those dead cats over the course of my career. But I really agree with both of you, right? The speed of innovation, being able to ingest these services to make these changes. From my own experience, one of the challenges over time was talking about something that you wanted to do, right? Even as an enterprise CIO, but being really stuck in the bog of getting it done, right? I mean, I think that can be a real thing. And now that part of the process, at least, I don't know that it makes the change management any easier, but I think you can get to, and you both spoke to this, a solution much, much quicker, right? You can iterate on that much, much quicker. So our three big themes, modernizing your workforce. We talked about cross-agency collaboration and building wonderful teams. We talked about accelerating and enhancing citizen experiences, and then really the transformation piece, right? And we know that cloud is a big part of that. So Scott and Sean, to each take just a minute or two and kind of final thoughts and takeaways. If you could sort of, do the, here's my top three in what we're talking about. I'm really kind of curious on that part. Scott, I'll turn to you first. What are your top several or key takeaways or thoughts on this topic?
I mean, ultimately, I think part of what we need to do is harness and leverage the fact that we have people everywhere, and how do we make them productive and included. And I'd say there are three big things to think about or working on. One is, how do you reimagine the office as a place that is not about people parking their behinds from 9 to 5, but really collaborating? If you think about that as the logical conclusion, you probably need more conference rooms for people to meet in collaboration and fewer desks. We're rolling out a new office right now where we have 75% fewer desks than we had before, and I think that's actually too much. We probably need fewer desks, because the reality is, I think when people are going to show up, we want them to show up and meet and collaborate, not just sit down and do what they were doing before. And the other logical conclusion of that is we need to reimagine what a desk is. Like, is a desk a permanent thing that someone gets, or is a desk that more like a parking spot that you reserve? So part of what we're working on is more of this flexible desking, booking experience that you come in that is designed to be shared, not owned. And how do you also figure out that when you share it and book it, how do you make sure that when you come in, you don't have the commuter's regret where you come in those 3-4 times and nobody you're working with is there? So it's more about booking a desk. It's about coming up with a system to figure out who is there, how do you invite your colleagues to come work with you? And that's one of the big things that we just announced and are working on about flexible desking. I think the second thing is, I would say anybody who rolled that video within the last 2 years, anything older than that is totally obsolete. And you need to think about this AI multi-camera approach so that the people who are remote don't have this terrible experience. Because what I think we're finding is people just say, you know what, everyone will just stay at home, which is not that good, including our staff, by the way. So I think there's this big leapfrog happening in collaboration. The good news is that most of the solutions are now emerging and are there. So I'd encourage you to think about how do you look at those things rather than what we did in the past. And then the third thing is just, it's basics, like for people who are working at home most of the time, don't go so cheap on their tools. Like, there are things you can get that are tens or hundreds of dollars that will greatly enhance, not only their experience, but for the people who are seeing them, both in the audio and video. There's this term called Zoom fatigue, and I think people associate it with Zoom or video, but I don't think it's the video. It's because people's audio and video sucks. And the reason why you know that is if someone's audio is bad, you lean in like this, you see people squinting their eyes. That's because you're making them tired. You're more tired than being together. So you don't want to invest the money into that person. It's actually for everyone else to not be as exhausted, kind of emulate the experience. I think those are three of the big things. Obviously, there are other things around social and culture, but those are three of the big things that people can think of, and certainly I'm working on, and my team is
Sure.
problems to solve to really not only improve but make everything better than it was before.
Yeah, I love it. Reserve a desk. I love it. Sean, what do you think?
Well, Scott touched on this a couple of times, and you did as well, Craig, but it's important to note or understand that digital collaboration, it really does differ from the traditional approach to collaboration. And in terms of how your team members interact and share knowledge with one another. In the traditional collaboration, and Scott mentioned this, employees, meet physically in the same, workspace, and they, either collaborate without digital tools or, digital tools playing a secondary role rather than a more primary role. And also in that traditional approach, almost all of the collaboration occurs in a synchronous manner, right? All at the same time, in the same physical and time space, right? And so, conversely, in digital collaboration, teamwork and collaboration, they're enhanced through digital tools, regardless of where employees are located. If team members have ideas, they can return to a digital platform or, to a digital set of systems and continue to ideate or collaborate or contribute asynchronously, on their own time, in their own physical space. And so, as a technology leader, you got to be thinking about all of that. You've got to be thinking about now that we have a mixed workplace with some 100% remote, some 100% on premise, and a good chunk of folks in a hybrid mode. You've got to be thinking about all the systems that are being used and accessed, and how the quality, ease of use, reliability, and accessibility can be enhanced. And so that's really a key thing. And so that's one point. Second, I think before, as a technology leader, we settle on a strategy. If we can, we need to endeavor to walk in our employees and or in our customers' shoes, so to speak. I mean, submit an application as if you were someone applying for benefits, as an example. Try to participate in a 25 or 30 person meeting from your desk using a single camera and see how it goes, right? And so, I think it's important to kind of walk the walk so that you can, as a leader, envision the kind of experience that your employees and your customers really have with your organization, and whether that's good enough or not, or whether you do have the money and the expertise, either internally or with partners, to change that. I think the last point I'd make, in the interest of time, is that we need to establish and nurture strategic relationships with our private sector vendor partners. They really have, in this area, the key knowledge that we could never obtain on our own, at least not in a timely manner, right? They a lot of times have national and global reach. They're working with customers at all levels of government. They've implemented and piloted and prototyped solutions that we would never have the money or the time to go through that same kind of process. And so we've got to rely on their expertise and ensure that we're thoughtful about exploring the art of the possible together with them.
Agree totally. So Scott mentioned the Reinventing Government book, which is a fabulous book, but I'm reminded of a book, a newer book called Power to the People, which really, Sean, talks about something you mentioned, right? That they literally went and filled out applications by way of energizing the digital transformation process, which I love that. So look, guys, to kind of button this up, let's tackle a poll question, right? We heard from our audience at the beginning. So our second poll question, which action would reduce challenges of the evolving government workforce, which we've talked about? So implementing tools to promote inclusive and equal engagement for remote participants, updating meeting room technology and workspaces to enhance collaboration, productivity, simplifying desk booking and efficient resource management in flexible workspaces, which we talked about, reduce real estate costs and support sustainability goals, promote community engagement in public events, or equip remote employees to support service delivery. So we'll give just a few more seconds for our audience to kind of chime in. And then when these results come in, I think we'll try to wrap up our conversation with this feedback that we have from our audience. Okay, so let's see what our audience is thinking about these, the reduction of challenges and where are we in terms of that. So let's take a look at our poll results. Wow, interesting. Kind of a little bit different than our first question. We've got not quite a third, and a third, but pretty close across these first three that are listed. So we've got about 3 or 4 minutes left, but let's dive in briefly. Scott, what does this say to you when you see this?
Well, I'd say interesting that desk booking and real estate is on people's minds, because I think what we're all trying to figure out is, all right, as I said earlier, the model of what you even did in an office is evolving from, hey, let's stuff as many desks in a space as possible to let's figure out what people are going to do there, and they'll only come in when they need to do there to be together. So I think it's both an opportunity to maybe downsize our real estate where we don't need it as much, but completely rethink it. So I'm not really surprised by that. I'd say the first two, updating meeting room technology and tools inclusive, they're probably two sides of the same coin.
Yeah.
Because I think it's probably reflecting some of the same issues of you have people remotely. And, I'd say one of the ironies is the reason why you update meeting room technology is not for the people in the room, it's for the people looking in. I mean, I'll give you another example, not related to video. How many of us have seen somebody write on the wall with a whiteboard or Post-its, and nobody can see it? Somebody gets their iPhone and takes a picture, and it's totally broken, right? So for example, we created a whiteboard camera that is dedicated to that, to throw into your Teams or Zoom meeting with the push of a button. I mean, those are all more examples of how, when you have people on both sides, how you need to recreate and fix some of these hacks that people have. Like I admire the iPhone picture taking thing, but clearly I don't think anybody listening to this thinks that's a great solution.
Yeah, for sure. So Sean, you see this as well. Scott's chimed in. What does this say to you? Because you're still in it. You're still boots on the ground there in government. What does this say to you?
Yeah, I mean, I think it says we're still figuring things out, right? We're still trying to make sense of honestly what makes sense for government from a corporate office space perspective, so to speak. From one of the reasons that folks are being called back into the office is economic development in our communities, right? You've got downtown areas that, need people to come back, need public workers to come back. That's one key theme. I do think, though, on the specifics of this conversation that, Scott again highlights the fact that, state and local government IT leaders and business leaders are rarely production engineers, or I don't know what the right word is, but he mentioned Hollywood. We don't really have a lot of background expertise on the proper staging of a conference room and how to integrate visuals and video and people marking on a board. A lot of us are still in the Mylar non-permanent marker stage, with the projector, right?
Yeah.
So, we really need some help in terms of that expertise on how to lead, as you mentioned, Craig, at the outset, not incrementally improve, but just lead to the future, right?
Absolutely.
So, this doesn't surprise me, but I think again, as state and local government professionals, we're just in a mode of trying to make sense of it all and try to chart a path forward that is absolutely not, if we can at all help it, just simply a return back to our brick and mortar ways of old.
Agree totally. So a lot of us in the audience, I know have been asking about getting copies of our presentation today. So within about the next 48 hours, Government Technology will provide all attendees with a link to the recording for not only your reference, but hopefully if you have a colleague that couldn't make it today, you can share that, right? And maybe it'll spur some remarkable conversation. So listen, with that, I want to be respectful of our 60-minute commitment. We'll have to wrap it up here. But in closing, I'd like to thank everyone for joining us today, to taking time out of your day. A really big thank you to both Scott and Sean for a wonderful, wonderful conversation. And of course, our partner, Logitech, thank you so much. A couple of quick reminders. Please check out the Logitech resources in our widget. If you have any questions at all, Logitech has a wonderful set of account teams that can help. So with that, friends, thank you once again. We look forward to seeing you soon, I hope, at another government technology event. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you, Craig.